if we just realize that, hey, it wasn't personal, and maybe we actually just treated them like, we don't have to treat them nice. I don't have to kiss the butt. But if I just treated them like, I don't know, a person.
Wait, a human being?
Yeah, like an actual, just human. Like I said, I don't have to treat them like they're my friend, because they're not. But they're a human. So let's not take it personal. You'd be surprised that just by doing something like that. I had many people that I arrested unintentionally. I wasn't trying to be nice by any stretch. But I had many people that afterward would thank me for, the way I arrested them.
San Diego 911 emergency. You need to come right away. There's a man with a gun and it's loaded. Receiving emergency signal from 4 George 1141. Got a white female down. We need paramedics code, please. All available units will code that
way. One of my two absolute favorite conferences every year that I go to is ILETA, the International Law Enforcement Educators and Trainers Association. It's held in St. Louis, usually in March around St. Patrick's Day. And this year, in 2023, I was able to get a bunch of the really top-notch instructors that come to ILETA every year in a room and be able to interview them for this De-Escalation Conversations podcast. And this year, the group of them were just amazing. And you're about to meet one of them. Robert Carlson has over 20 years in law enforcement, serving since 2013 as an instructor for the Memphis Police Department. He has over 27 years in the military. He's currently the lead tactical medical instructor for the Regional Counter-Drug Training Academy, providing free training to law enforcement around the country. As a police officer, Robert has served as a crisis intervention team specialist and as a trained crisis negotiator. He's recognized as an expert in active shooters and tactical medicine, regularly speaking on law enforcement response to active shooter events. Robert is the founding president of Brave Defender Community Services, a nonprofit focused on active shooter prevention and education. He's also the owner of Brave Defender Training Group, providing training to police and military. In this episode, Robert and I dive in to his views on de-escalation and his experience in this really, really important subject. So here's Robert. Welcome to the De-Escalation Conversations podcast. And my guest today, I tell you what, every time I talk to you, I am just blown away by your depth of knowledge, your level of skills, the different things that you've done. And just, you have set the bar high.
I appreciate that.
Both as an instructor, as well as just how you live life. You are one of those people that's the epitome of living life large.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah,
you're welcome.
That's true flattery. I've never had anybody compliment me like that. I appreciate that.
I mean that, though. You really, I really admire all the different things that you've done, both on the military, the law enforcement end, the family end. You're just all in, and I really respect people that do that.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome. So, de-escalation conversations.
Yes.
Let's talk de-escalation. How do you look at de-escalation?
I look at this de-escalation a little different than I think most people, even especially in the law enforcement world, look at it. I think it's almost become a catchphrase, and it's not a one-stop shop. There's no magical trick to de-escalation. It's just learning how to talk to people. There's no specific technique. It's just, we just have to learn how to talk to people and just stop being weird about it. And that, I think, is really the greatest key to this magical unicorn called de-escalation.
Yeah. And so when you talk about talking to people, because we teach ways to reach inside the other person's brain and flip a switch.
Yes.
And make their brain happy. What are some ways that when you talk about talking to people, what are some things that you do that helps you connect with people? Because you're really good at establishing rapport and connection with people. I've noticed that.
Well, I think it depends on the context of what we're talking about. I spent a little bit of time, as a police officer. I was a crisis intervention officer for several years. I spent some time doing some training with the FBI on hostage negotiations. That's not to say that I ever worked as a negotiator, but I did work with and train with people that were extremely good at it. And some of the takeaways that I learned from that, I've applied honestly in almost every aspect of my life. And probably the biggest thing that I've learned out of that is when I'm trying to establish rapport with somebody, especially somebody that's in a state of crisis. So in a law enforcement capacity, the person that we think of that we're trying to de-escalate, or a situation that we're trying to de-escalate, the greatest tool that I have found is to empower that person. I cannot tell you what you should do or what you can't do, because guess what? You can do it. I can't say, no, you can't do this, because they might decide to prove me wrong. So the greatest thing that I found when it comes to just conversing with people is to make them realize, or help them realize is probably a better word, that they actually have power and control over this situation, more so than I do, because they're the ones that's making the decision. I'm just there to help guide them to what is the hopefully optimal decision. So to me, that's probably been the single biggest takeaway that I've taken from all of that is, don't tell people, help them come to their own answer and give them the sensation that they have the power to do that.
I like that. Something just popped into my head, that kind of an analogy to that. We can't control someone else. We can influence them.
Yes.
But like you said, we can't control them. And there is an adult out there, much less a child, who likes to be told what they have to do or what to do.
Correct.
Everybody likes to make their own decisions. I got a 4-year-old grandson. If you tell him what to do, it just doesn't go well.
No.
It hasn't gone well since he was about 6 months old.
Right.
And so, and they just, 4-year-old grandsons grow into 40-year-old adults at some point. Well, hopefully not real fast, but so here's where I'm going with this. We know this. We know it's universal. Taser is called an electronic control device.
Yes.
Is that a pleasant experience? No, that's not a pleasant experience either.
Yep.
So whether you're trying to control someone with an ECD, or you're just trying to control somebody with verbal or any kind of influence, like pointing a weapon at him, pointing a less lethal weapon at him, any of that's, none of it's pleasant.
No.
But influence, persuasion, that's not a bad situation. Yeah. So I don't know. It's just that literally, as soon as you were talking about controlling people, ECD popped into my head, and I hadn't drawn that correlation before.
Well,
what do you think about that?
And honestly, it applies even more than just that, because really, like you said, you can't control another person in any volatile scene or a crisis scene. You can only control one person. That's me. Myself. I have no control over anything else. I can influence it, I can impact it, I can steer it, I can guide it. But at the end of the day, the only person I truly have control over is myself, which is probably the second biggest part of de-escalation, is learning how to control yourself. If you can't even control yourself, how are you going to steer somebody else into another direction? So that's a whole nother thing. But like you were talking about with the taser or the electronic control devices or any less lethal, that applies not even just on those, but if you even think about it in a defensive tactics realm, it is not physically possible to handcuff a person that is not willing to let you handcuff them. At some point, they have to submit to that. So you can't even force someone truly. No, I mean, you get 5, 6, enough people on there. Sure, we might be able to outmuscle this, get enough handcuffs, something. But for the most part, especially if it's a 1-on-1 or even a 2-on-1 type of scenario, as most police arrests are, you're not going to fight this person in handcuffs. You're going to have to, might be through physical discomfort, aka pain, might be through other form of control techniques, but to get them into the physical restraints, they have to be convinced that this is what is best for them, and ultimately.
Yeah. One of the things that we teach is that de-escalation doesn't stop when you use force.
No.
Or when the handcuffing even has been completed.
Yes. Actually, in many cases, that might even be when the de-escalation starts.
Sometimes, yeah. And to be able to continue that through until they're on the other side of the jail cell door and it's closed, and they're a deputy's problem versus the street cop, whether they're a deputy on the street or a police officer, whatever, security guard, whatever they are. So what are some things, some tools, some tips, some hacks that you've used that you can share with our listeners for after the handcuffing, and in that time between handcuffing and turning over to custody, or maybe let him go? If you had to use force, probably not, but probably not going to let him go. But sometimes that de-escalation, maybe the handcuffing went well, and then it starts to go downhill, and you're like, oh, I was going to let you go with the ticket, but maybe I can still. So, but after the handcuffing, regardless of the circumstances, what have you found that works well?
For me, what I found worked well for working when I worked patrol and I was making arrests, and I worked in a pretty rough area. And so
I would expect nothing less.
No, it was by choice. That's where I wanted to be. I mean, you're going to be a police officer. Go where you're going to do the greatest work. Yeah. But one of the things that I found, and I don't know why this seemed to come so easy to me versus other people I worked with, was I had a really good ability to kind of compartmentalize. And to me, I understood none of this was personal. This was a job. It's the criminal's job to not get caught, and that means possibly fight me. It is my job to catch them and stop them from doing that. So it's all a job. And so for the most part, once they're in cuffs, we as police, we always say, all right, once the cuffs are on, the fight's over. Well, okay, that also, not only does that apply to physical force, but that also applies to the mental and psychological aspect as well. Once the cuffs are on, you can go ahead and ramp yourself down now too. You've done your job. So let's start. There's no reason to berate or belittle or antagonize. Why? You've already won. They're in cuffs. Stop it. This is a good point where, if we just realize that, hey, it wasn't personal, and maybe we actually just treated them like, we don't have to treat them nice. I don't have to kiss their butt. But if I just treated them like, I don't know, a person.
Wait, a human being?
Yeah, like an actual, just human. Like I said, I don't have to treat them like they're my friend, because they're not. But they're a human. So let's not take it personal. You'd be surprised that just by doing something like that. I had many people that I arrested unintentionally. I wasn't trying to be nice by any stretch, but I had many people that afterward would thank me for the way I arrested them. And a lot of those people, they're going to get out. They don't stay in there forever. They stay in there a whole lot less now than they used to. But even back then, they didn't stay in there forever. They're going to get back out. Chances are I'm going to encounter this person again.
Yeah.
And if I treated them properly the first time, I may not have to use as much force the next time. I may have already started the de-escalation for my second encounter, my third encounter, on my first encounter. But if I screw that first encounter up, I guarantee you are not going to be able to de-escalate the next time you find this person, because they have no reason to trust you. They have no reason to believe you, because last time you treated them wrong, and they're going to fight you.
Yeah.
Period.
And they're going to remember it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Criminals have very long memories. And who have even longer memories is criminals' families.
Good
So,
point.
yep.
Good point. Yeah, you're probably going to have frequent flyers,
Yes.
as we call them, and repeat customers, and they're going to know you. I remember when I was a brand new officer riding around with a senior officer who made a lot of arrests, and his name was Brian. We'd pull up to a group of people, and we'd get out and go up and talk to them, consensual conversation, and we were working in areas of high narcotics activity, and in this particular part of town, it was rock cocaine, crack cocaine, and we'd get out, and they'd be, "Hey, Officer Brian, how you doing today?" Everybody knew him, and he treated people really, really well. What was interesting was it didn't slow down the number of arrests that he made. In fact, it enhanced his ability to make arrests, because he'd walk up, he didn't have to fight anybody, he didn't have to chase after anybody, even if they were holding. That was amazing to me, but I learned from that, and that's really critical. And you know, just time. There was not a day that he and his normal partner, when I wasn't riding with him, were coming in with a felony arrest, if not a couple, all dope. It was great to watch.
Yeah.
He became a good friend, and I learned a lot from him, kind of in that same vein. So let me ask you this. When you talk about treating someone like a human being, but not kissing their butt,
No.
Any examples come to mind on that?
Just nothing specific. I mean, you know, and don't get me wrong, I was extremely well known on my shift. I loved foot chases. That was my favorite activity, and I loved getting into the fights. And that was, if they started resisting, I was all over that. That was my favorite thing. But the second it was over, it was over. And that was that line. And it was just, and everybody always understood that, me and the people I was arresting. And I guess there's one incident that I remember. I had arrested a guy. He ran from me. He resisted. We fought. It got heated and ugly. But when it was done, you know, I had him in the back of the car. You know, first thing I asked him was, "Are you okay?" And you know, and he kind of looked at me and was, you know,
like, you're an alien.
Yeah, like, why are you asking me this? So I said, well, I said, look, we fought. Are you okay? Do you need me to call an ambulance for you? And he said no. And just that simple question, I ran into him about a year later, I guess. And you know, of course, when you run into somebody that you arrest, especially one that was kind of a heated, volatile, somewhat violent arrest, you know, that puts you on edge when he comes up to you and he's, you know, "Officer Carlson, you arrested me last year." Hand goes to the gun. You're like, "Oh God, this is going to go real bad." And he comes over and he shakes my hand and he goes, "I just wanted to thank you, because you could have done me a lot worse than you did." And he ended up giving me a tip on a gang leader that I had been hunting for, as thank you, I guess. But I ended up, because of arresting, I mean, like I said, we fought pretty good. But he ended up handing me a gang leader that we had been hunting for 6 months.
Wow.
Just because I'd asked him, "Are you okay?" I didn't even think about it. I didn't even realize what I was doing at the time. It was just, "Hey, you hit me pretty hard. And I know I hit you pretty hard. So do you need me to call an ambulance?" Maybe I don't hit nearly as hard as I thought. Maybe I need to go to the gym a little bit more. I don't know.
Dude, look at you. You hit hard. I have no doubt about that.
But you know,
you are stoked.
But it just, to me, that just seemed like a natural question to ask.
Yeah.
And it paid off.
Yeah, that's awesome. That is awesome. I'm sure with all the people that you've arrested and those type of situations, that you've had somebody after you've arrested them sit in your back seat, chip, 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 chip. You talked about being able to compartmentalize. So let's say there's a newer officer that's listening to the podcast. and they're thinking, yeah, well, that's nice. Treat them with respect, all that. I get that. How do I keep from losing my mind? And we used to call it screen testing.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
How do we not screen test somebody when they're just chipping? Even if it's, I work San Diego, so we had a lot of people who spoke Spanish because they were up from Mexico, and I was able to figure out when I was being sworn at pretty quickly, and I knew that Madre was wrapped in there somewhere, and I didn't think they were telling me that my mom wore army boots.
Right.
But when they're chipping away at you, how did you deal with that?
Sometimes not as well as I probably should have.
Fair enough.
I'm not going to lie and say that I haven't lost control before. I think any police officer who says, "Oh, I've always done it perfect," I've never done that. They're either lying or they're not actually out there policing. All of us at some point have that emotional breaking point, and sometimes we realize it. And there's been some times that I've had to step out of the car, and instead of writing my report in the car, I wrote the report on the hood of the car, because just dude in the back seat was just pushing a little too many buttons. And but sometimes maybe they find that right trigger, and so the best thing I can tell people is, again, go back to that: learn how to control yourself. In order to control yourself, you need to understand yourself. You need to know what your triggers are. So, that takes a lot of self-reflection. And unfortunately, sometimes we don't find what those triggers are until somebody pushes them. And all I can say is learn from it. You're never going to do everything. You're never going to do it perfect. But if you learn from it, so maybe next time when you start seeing what that looks like, then you can distance yourself from that situation, and and help keep yourself under control, or go get somebody else. I've had that several times where I've realized that this situation, the way I was handling it, was not helping, and maybe it was this person just didn't like me, maybe didn't like my hair, whatever. But for some reason, even though I may have been the officer that was supposed to be handling it, maybe I was the CIT officer. And, that it's my scene. This is a crisis scene. I'm supposed to handle this. Well, that works great. But if the suspect doesn't like you, you're not helping. So hand it off to somebody else. Stand behind them. Maybe whisper in their ear, give them some advice, but let them handle it, because all you're going to do is aggravate the situation.
Yeah.
I mean, I had one individual. He was one of our frequent flyers. We call them mental consumers. A person with a mental health diagnosis. So we always send a CIT officer, crisis intervention officer, to deal with them. This guy was extremely combative with police, hated police, and for some reason really hated me. Thought I'd shot him in the back 10 years before I even became a police officer. Wasn't me. Okay. I didn't even live in the city. But for some reason, I was the guy that shot him. And so if he saw me, fight was on. That was all it took, was if he saw me get out of the car, the fight was on. But we recognized that. It took us a couple times to deal with it. Why is this guy fighting me more than he's fighting everybody else? But it took us a couple times to realize that. Well, so that meant we changed our tactics. If I was the officer that was dispatched to deal with him, we would call in a different officer to deal with it, and I would go to more of a support role where he didn't see me. I would be there in case things went bad. So I'd be kind of hiding in the shadows, if you will. But we knew just my presence was going to aggravate that situation, and so we changed our tactics in dealing with him.
That's an awesome way to handle that. And for our listeners, by the way, we have an exercise. Normally we use it with our advanced de-escalation training and relationships transformation training. But if you're listening to this episode and you send us an email at team@theidea.world, I'll send you the exercise on identifying your triggers.
Yep.
And it walks you right through the process. And here's the cool thing. If you're a supervisor, if you're an FTO, you can use this, or if you're just an officer on the squad, You don't have to be a leader by rank or by title. Take that leadership role for the officers that you work with, deputies that you work with, and bring it up, make copies for everybody, get a squad meeting, and have everybody go through it. Because if I know what your triggers are, and you know what my triggers are, we roll up to a scene together and something starts happening. You might not realize it until you're deep in it.
Yes.
But I see things happening. I'm like, oh yeah, that's your triggers. I tap you on the shoulder. Hey, my contact.
Yep.
And you're like, whoa. But you realize real quick, oh, okay.
Yep.
And when you have that agreement, especially for a squad that's tight, that's working together, then you know I'm doing it to help you out, not to be a jerk and try and take over your scene.
Yep.
I'm doing it because I recognize, hey, this is probably going to go bad real quick.
Well, and that requires a very difficult thing for police officers, especially checking their egos.
Yeah.
That's another critical aspect is you got to learn to check your ego. And because, sometimes you're not the right person.
Yeah.
Sometimes the person you're dealing with, like I said, you have to be allowed to give them control. That you don't get to run this scene. You're just there to help facilitate it.
Yeah.
You don't get to have an ego.
Yeah, exactly. And it doesn't mean that you don't have the knowledge, skills, and abilities to be able to do it in some other situation. It's just the dynamics of this particular situation are not fitting what you're just not the right puzzle piece to drop in.
Yep.
We just need a different puzzle piece.
Yep.
And that might be another officer, another deputy. I mean, they might even be junior to you. They might be even brand new, but they're the right puzzle piece for this because you are not the right one. So recognize that and be able to take a step back. And gosh, quite frankly, today, we need to be able to do that because more than ever, there are so many eyes on us, whether it's body cams or somebody holding up a cell phone or security cam on a building. It's just not worth it anymore to try and force your way through it.
No, you in today's day and age, we're in a fishbowl. You cannot go anywhere without being in a camera. Between ring cameras and traffic cameras and cell phone cameras and
Tesla. The cars. I forget how many cameras is on a Tesla.
Yeah, it's insane.
There's a bunch of them.
And
they do a mini-series documentary on your life in just one car.
And all of those are accessible.
Yeah.
And that's the thing a lot of officers don't realize is they think that, oh, it's dark, nobody's watching me. No, that ring camera is always recording.
Yeah, it's night vision capable too.
And that stuff is subpoenaable, and it is police can get that.
Yeah.
So that's a good note for bad guys too.
Yeah.
But we always have access to that. And so you're always being watched.
Yeah.
So you have to learn to check your ego, especially today.
Yeah.
You are not going to force this situation. It cannot happen.
So let's shift gears just a little bit, shifting gears, not directions, not even the subject, but I do a lot of training with agencies that are rural agencies. And I guarantee you there's some usually deputies that are listening to this podcast. And I want you to know, I'm hearing you in my head. You're like transmitting to my head right now going, Kara, I get it. You work San Diego. I get it that we're talking big city policing. I don't have another deputy that I can shift this to. I'm one riot, one ranger. There's one deputy. In fact, if my cover was 15 minutes away, I'd be dancing happy. My cover is an hour away.
Yep.
If I have cover, because highway patrol went home at 3:00 in the morning and it's 3:05 and I don't have cover that I would normally have for my other deputy because they're on the other side of the county. So that requires me, if I'm not deputy, one more riot, one ranger deputy, I got to shift myself now because I can't pass that off to another person. Any thoughts on that?
So, now I've never worked in a rural setting. I've worked for a couple agencies over my career, and all of them were municipal agencies. But I've spent a lot of time training rural agencies in various programs. So I do while I've never worked it, I kind of get the challenges of it. And one of the biggest takeaways is you especially if you're rural, whether it's state, whether it's county, whether it's tribal police, border patrol, whatever, for whatever reason, if you're all there is and that's all you've got, you better be better at de-escalation than every other officer on the planet. Because I have the luxury of being in a large department. My backup is pretty close away. If this gets messed up, help's coming. And I'm probably not going to be there by myself for very long regardless. But if you're by yourself, it is always going to be in your best interest to talk someone into the back seat. That is all. I am not going to fight you into the back seat if I can talk you into it. There is just zero reason to. And if I'm by myself, that is even more critical. And so if you're one of those officers or those agencies that works in those remote rural areas, you have really got to get good at reading people and listening to people and talking to people. And then more importantly, recognizing shifts in patterns and behavior, because at some point they're going to give you the cues of whether this is working or this isn't. And those cues may give you the direction to, I either need to shift my focus or shift my tactics, or this is about ready to go really bad. And you have to be able to recognize sometimes. Again, this is where that de-escalation is that magical unicorn. Not every situation you're going to de-escalate. You better recognize when that is, because you need to get ahead of that. And so being able to read body language and behavior and those kind of things, so that this is about to go physical. De-escalation is over. I need to be able to transition to a physical response, whether that's lethal, less lethal, control tactics, fighting, running away, creating space. So I probably shouldn't say running away. We don't run
Creating
away.
space. This just sounds so much better.
Yes, running away. Wrong verbiage. Erase that. Delete that on the podcast. But a tactical re-engagement, creating distance to allow yourself time for more options. Distance is our friend. Increases your options. That's another huge problem that police have, is once I'm engaged. I'm not gonna to retreat. It's not a retreat. It's a repositioning. Repositioning may be that way, and that's okay, as long as it increases my tactical advantage. There's nothing wrong with that. So it's important we have to recognize those things, because not every situation is going to be de-escalated.
Yeah, and again, because maybe you're the wrong piece in that puzzle and you don't have somebody else you can shift it over to. I'll say this, at IDEA, we give officers and deputies, flight attendants, because flight attendants, you're not getting cover at 37,000 feet.
No.
You might be lucky that some passenger on the plane or some of the other flight attendants will jump in, but it's amazing how many people don't. But the ability to, especially if you're in that one ranger situation, the ability to have a bunch of different tools in your toolbox. You see it's not going well, being able to shift your languaging, being able to shift your tone, being able to shift to a different tool. It's one of the reasons why we give all of our students, whether the K through 12 teacher, fire, police, medical services, flight attendants, we give them a lot of different tools, so they can choose whatever tool they need for that situation. And hopefully one of those tools will work, but disengaging is an option and something that you need to consider.
Very viable option. And in some cases, maybe even the preferred option. First rule of a gunfighter, first rule of any fight, bring a friend. And if I don't have a friend, wait till I get a friend.
And the friend you might bring two friends, Smith and Wesson. Maybe one friend Glock, but that might be your friend. It might not be an option for you to bring one of those friends.
And some scenarios may not even be appropriate to ever try a de-escalation. And that my background, my specialization is an active shooter. And I see so many times, well, I won't say so many, because we're getting better. But there are numerous cases, some of which very recently, where we have had officers on the scene of what is a blatantly obvious active shooter event, and they're going to try and de-escalate it.
Yeah.
There's no de-escalating that. This is not a de-escalation scenario. It is time to do tactical solutions to a tactical problem.
Yeah.
This is not a de-escalation. And that's part of that, recognizing the scene and recognizing what you can and can't control. Is sometimes you can try and de-escalate, and sometimes your attempt to de-escalate is going to get people killed. And
Right.
it is time to do tactical things.
Yeah. And I've shared a little bit. Listeners have been with us for a while. I was involved in 2 officer-involved shootings, fatals, in my career of 30 years. And my very first one, there was 0 opportunity to de-escalate.
Yep.
The suspect became aware of our presence, and she immediately pointed a handgun at us, and she had already tried to kill people.
Mm-hmm.
So there was there was not even any warning about drop the gun. And I'm a big proponent, and if you're able to give that warning, then okay.
Yeah.
But you're not required.
No.
When you're in danger, you're not required to give that warning. And so I didn't. In fact, I was asked about that. Why didn't you say drop the gun? Because then I would have had to wait for a response for her to either drop it or shoot us. She'd already been pointing the gun at us long enough that I expected around any fraction of a second from now.
Yep.
So yes, I 100% agree with you on that. There are times when we're not even going to attempt de-escalation. And yet, when there is time, where you can make time.
Yes.
When
and that's where that distance comes in.
Exactly. When you can have, I always draw the correlation to, I was on nuclear powered submarines.
Mm-hmm.
I was in the Navy for 9 years. And because we had a nuclear reactor and nuclear missiles on board, everything that we did, not everything, but a vast majority of what we did was, what do we do if there's a radiation spill, a radiation leak? Time, distance, and shielding.
Yes.
So when I came into law enforcement and started hearing about, again, it was de-escalation wasn't even a term back then, but everything was time, distance, shielding. I'm like, well, like a radiation exposure.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a radiation drill in the military.
Yep.
Same exact thing. And when you can avoid getting too close, when you can avoid speeding things up artificially,
yes,
if you can avoid being out in the open when you don't need to be, when you've left cover and concealment, sometimes you don't have a choice.
Yep.
But sometimes you do. So awesome. I love our conversations. They're just awesome. As we wind things up, is there anything you want to make sure that our listeners know about?
I mean, again, like I said, the kind of how I led this off was, don't think that de-escalation is this magical one-stop instant unicorn that's just going to fix everything. And it doesn't work like that. It's a process. It's literally just learning how to talk to people. And that's the thing that a very good friend of mine that I work with, he has a saying, I'm going to steal it, and I'm not going to give him credit for it. One of the most important rules when we, as law enforcement officers, when we're interacting with people, just don't be weird. That's all it is.
Yeah.
Just don't be so mechanical. Don't be weird. Just talk to them like you would talk to any other person on the street.
Yeah.
Stop being weird. That's to me, that's de-escalation.
Yeah. That's a big step toward it. Mine is don't be a jerk.
Yep.
There's no need for that. It's sometimes it's hard to dial it back, honestly. Because look, the more time you spend on the street as a cop, more time you spend in the classroom as a teacher, or an ambulance as a medic, or fire rig as a firefighter, flight attendant, the more time you spend in any kind of public service occupation, care what it is, you tend to become a little bit more short-tempered, a little bit more cynical, a little bit more sarcastic, or in some cases, a lot.
Yes.
And that's because you've had 14 conversations, all of them are exactly the same, and then you have a 15th one. But for the citizen that you're having that 15th one, it's their first.
Their first. Yep.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. how to talk to people. Well, that's what we teach people at IDEA.
Yep.
So check out our online courses at theidea.world. In our show notes, we're going to put the ways to contact you, the way to stay in touch with you. So look in the show notes, and hey, while you're there checking them out, and then they're on Facebook, they're in YouTube. While you're there, and whatever podcast platform you might be listening to this to, please do us a favor, hit that like and the subscribe button, and smash that on, like on YouTube, smash that little notification bell. Don't do it twice, because then it'll be like you never did it the first time, but smash that little notification bell. We have a new episode that drops every Monday morning at 6 a.m. Pacific. And occasionally we throw in a bonus episode just to keep you guessing whether or not there's something new there. So as we wind this up again, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Honored. And actually, I have a gift for you. This is the IDEA Challenge coin.
Awesome.
And
thank you
I
so
want to
much.
give you a gift. Thank you for being a guest on the
It's
show.
a pleasure. Thank you.
We're doing this interview at ILETA,
Yep.
International Law Enforcement Educators Trainers Association, and catch us here every year in St. Louis at the same time. It's around St. Patrick's Day every year in March. If you are a law enforcement trainer, you need to be aware of ILETA. You need to be here, because there's about 650, 700 of us
Yeah, I
this
think
year.
there's about 700 here right now. Yeah, it's phenomenal.
It's phenomenal. Lots of great training, lots of great conversations to have with people. They're just amazing. Listeners, until next time, as always, stay safe.